So I felt like this kind of empty space behind the creativity, because I was just creating to create, thinking that creating was the answer. Like, I just make music and that makes me happy and fulfilled. But I realized that wasn't the answer. Like, there's more to life than just creating all the time.
I can't wait to bring you this episode with Temple Haze, where we talk about his amazing journey from making it in rock and roll to creating sound journeys that merge spirituality with science. We talk about his transition and how he is now bringing what he saw as very unconscious work together with conscious work. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have gone through big changes, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to transform and unleash our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make, challenge how we view our environments, and deepen our understanding of ourselves and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about balancing living with flow and living with discipline, bringing spirituality to new audiences, being shown the way by women and the divine feminine, as well as by men and the divine masculine, and the importance of this school of life, as Temple calls it. We talk about living life as a ceremony full of rituals, creating safe spaces for people, the duality of transition, and the meaning of reality. You'll also learn about brainwave entrainment frequencies, what this means, and how you can enter different states and benefit from it. I found this fascinating. Listen to the end to hear about the rather out there books Temple is currently reading. Now, here's our interview. So Temple, hi, welcome to Going Conscious. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to be speaking to Temple today. He's an American musician and also a trained yoga teacher, and he's based in Berlin, where we're speaking today. He's collaborated with artists such as Sam Shure, Oliver Koletzki, and Bakery. He's supported Crystal Fighters, among many others. He's also creating sound journeys, and they cover breath work, meditation, brain entrainment frequencies, mantra singing circles, a lot of amazing things for us to dig into. I'm fascinated also by how Temple describes how he brings the underground Berlin music scene and spirituality together in harmony.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that journey, Temple, from your music career to where you are now with all of this conscious work that you're doing.
Yeah. Long journey. I mean, when I first came to Berlin, I guess this would be 2013, I came as just kind of a vagabond nomad, just on the road, playing on the streets, and I was I wouldn't say obsessed. I was really fascinated by this breaking through barriers, as in like not being on a stage, like being directly on the street, directly connecting with people. And I had this wish to really bring music directly to people without this barrier of there being a stage. And I was like obsessed with being a street kid, and smoking a lot of weed and experimenting with lots of different things. And I ended up with many different projects in Berlin. I mean, I always say coming to Berlin feels like a fast forward. Like you come here and then, at least I came here and then it was like, boom, this happened. And then boom, this project. And then this project's over. And then here's a new project. And then start building that project. And then all these other things happen. It's like, chuk, 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 chuk. And I had never felt this kind of energy from a city before, of this pew, 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 pew. And maybe that was Berlin. Maybe that was just the time in my life if I was like, okay, I ground here and I really build something. But yeah, then I had this project Bakery, and that was going really well. But we were just kind of like rock and roll lifestyle, like just rock out and fuck the world. And it's all right to curse on this podcast. There won't be that much cursing. But that was really the feeling, like we're cool. And we do this, and this is great. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, to really feel the youth, of being 23, 24, and like, rah, and taking the world on, and and enjoying it. But then at some point, I believe it was 2016, so the New Year's Eve switching into 2017, we just did this headlining tour. We had done a tour with Crystal Fighters. And I had like reached the goals, like my musical goals that I wanted to do, like playing big venues, playing at Burning Man, playing all these festivals. And I was like, okay, I did this, but I felt very empty because there was a lot of consumption. And it was just kind of banging one's head against the wall, and music was the answer for everything, but that wasn't really the answer, you know? So I felt like this kind of empty space behind the creativity, because I was just creating to create, thinking that creating was the answer. Like, I just make music, and that makes me happy and fulfilled. But I realized that wasn't the answer. Like, there's more to life than just creating all the time. And I'd say that also comes from the space of, you know, when you're just in a creative space, you kind of lose the rational and the logical. And you're just in this, like, oh, and I do this now, and I do this now. But then discipline or, having rules of what you do in your life, or for me, my entire discipline just went away. And I was just like, oh, I just wake up whenever, and I create music, and I live this, like, Andy Warhol lifestyle, and we just do this thing, and we just flow, right? We just flow, and maybe it doesn't work, and we just do this, that, and the other thing. And it was beautiful. But yeah, I felt that emptiness. And so I decided to make a change. So I stopped substances. I went kind of straight edge vegan for a while. And then that opened up the space of like, oh, what do I do? And then yoga and meditation came. And I met Eliza from Soneiro Collective. And then she was like, yeah, look, you can do this and you can do that and you can do this. And that's also a theme in my life of I meet women who show me the way very often, starting with my mother, like where they just, oh, you should do this, or you should do this, you know, and I find that as like meeting the divine feminine or the divine mother energy and then connecting with that, and then she shows you the way, a bit also like abuelita and all that stuff. Well, I'm going very far in a tangent at the moment. But yeah, so I met Eliza, and then we started working with music meditations, because she was already making meditations with two other musicians. And then I saw what they were doing, and I was like, very cool. Very cool. Let's see what's possible. Let's see if we can bring like the scientific world into this, you know, and that's how we got into brainwave entrainment frequencies, because I love the idea of sound meditations and guided meditations, but I also love the idea of basing it somewhere in science. So not just in yoga philosophy or spiritual philosophy, but also in, you know, our Western world that we can connect to. So we got into binaural beats and then incorporating that into the meditations. And then, yeah, from there, the project just grew. I became a yoga teacher, and then we were both yoga teachers, and then meeting more and more artists and musicians to collaborate with and other facilitators. And yeah, then we started like producing festival stages. Like last year, we did our own sanctuary stage at Pangea Festival, which was really beautiful, like our own consciousness stage at a techno. It was like a techno extreme sports festival. So they had like wave surfers and BMX people, and then like a van life area, and then the sanctuary. so that's beautiful. Yeah. So we're like we were like for a long time trying to bridge that gap of bringing spirituality to people who normally wouldn't get into it. So for example, at Feel and Art Lake Festival, which are these two underground festivals, more like techno, but also conscious and somewhat sustainable, you know, so there's no sponsors involved. We also created stages there where sometimes we'd have 300, 400, 500 people come. And I would guess out of that, maybe 30-40% had never meditated in their life or never done yoga. And like, for example, we'd have someone, I remember one moment where someone comes up in one of these like onesies, like an elephant or something. And they're just like, what is this? You know, and just like looking around and like, whoa. And they'd sit down and then go, wow, this is actually interesting. You know, so someone who just comes there to party and probably take drugs and consume a lot and have a good time, like stumbles upon our stage and goes, wow, this is cool. Like meditation is cool. And so for the first few years, our idea with Soneiro Collective was to really bring it like as far out as possible. So we go to the stage where there's a techno floor across from us blasting techno, and so we blast binaural beats, you know. So against the boom, 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 we're going woof, woof, you know, and yeah. So that's how it all kind of put itself together. And then, yeah, now we're here.
How do you incorporate science then in the music you create for meditations? What does that look like?
So that's with brainwave entrainment frequencies. So basically there's a theory called the frequency following response, which is the phenomenon that our brain, so the brain waves, in our mind tend to follow the rhythms and the patterns that are outside of us, so like external stimuli. So for example, if you listen to heavy metal music or something that's very fast, your brainwaves naturally hook onto that and entrain to it, so they synchronize with the pattern that's outside. For example, that's one of the reasons why with electronic music and techno, for example, which is normally between 120 to 140 BPM, and it stays at this BPM for hours, that people get in a trance-like state. Because then everyone is basically having a brainwave state of around 120 BPM. So everyone's just moving in that space. And so you're like, oh, wow, I feel so connected. I feel so like I'm with people in this moment. And it's actually because your brainwave frequencies are connecting if you're focusing on the music and if you're really like dancing and letting go into the music. There's also interesting theories like they did studies where there would be a group of people and there's a speaker, like say a TEDx talk, and they hooked all the people up to brainwave monitors, so EEG monitors. And the speaker was speaking, and something that everyone would kind of agree about. And when he would speak in this way that everyone agrees with it, they would see that the brain waves would start to sync with all the people when the people agree with him. And then at some point, everybody agrees. And then he's like, does everyone agree? And everyone's like, yes. And you see this synchronization of brain waves. So it's very interesting. And that, of course, comes from the fact that our brain has electrical impulses, so the neurons firing, which creates electrical energy in the brain. And we can read that electrical energy as hertz. And reading electrical energy is the same way that we read the energy coming from a pressure wave or coming from a musical wave, which is also in hertz. So when I play like this key on the piano, that's a certain hertz range. So say, I think that should be around 440 hertz, so 440 hertz is the sound of that. And the same as when our brains are in different states of consciousness, they're at a different amount of hertz, releasing the energy.
So you use the hertz to set the frequency of people's brains to help them get to a different state of consciousness then?
Yeah. So there's the studies have been done basically on, I believe it's 5 different hertz ranges. So there's delta wave, theta wave, alpha wave, beta wave, and now there's research being done on gamma wave frequency. And delta wave frequencies are the least amount of electrical information, so the least amount of neurons firing, which is around, I think, 0 to 2 hertz. And that's like deep sleep. So when you're deep asleep or when the brain's basically out, also some people, when they go very, very deep into meditation, so this space of nothingness, it's said that they can go into delta wave frequencies. And then there's theta wave. Maybe you've heard of theta healing. This is also, I think this was started to be popular in the 70s. And theta wave is this general deep meditative state. So not asleep or not nothingness, but that you are just conscious, but almost unconscious, and really in this deep space. And to create the binaural beat, it's basically the space, you have 2 frequencies, and then you make a very small amount of space between them, so in pitch. So you would have one frequency, would say be 440, and then you'd have a frequency that's 445. Now, I can't play that on the piano because it obviously has specific frequencies. And when you play 440 through the left and 445 through the right, you have a difference of 5 hertz, which is then felt in the pressure wave. So it would be like, woo, 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 woo. But that's more of a delta wave. And in general, so a theta wave of 5 hertz would be 5 hertz per second or 5 oscillations per second. So it would be more like woo, 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 woo. And your brain naturally picks up on this frequency. Also when it's very far behind in like ambient soundscapes, because I'll create a lot of different soundscapes with, recordings from India or from beaches or from birds that I've recorded, and then put these beats very much in the background, but just enough that you can still hear it and focus on it. And then that would bring you into, say, a delta wave or a theta wave brain state, so that you're really in this meditative space. And then you're more open to the guidance and you're more open to the experience that's happening.
Amazing. And so what is the guidance or experience then that people are opening up to with the sounds that they're hearing?
Yeah, it depends on our session. So we have a lot of different sessions. We have like a chakra sound journey, for example, which goes through each chakra. People love this. It's also a beautiful session because it's really going into the energetic body, and most people have heard of the chakras before, and they and they have an idea of what they are, and they have an idea of the energetic centers in their body, and they can really connect to the different spaces of their body and what the chakras represent, and connect to see, oh, is there a blockage here? Do I feel a lot of energy here? And then we also do elemental sound journeys. We do more shamanic sound journeys, which is based on going into the underworld, and then going into the overworld, the above world, and then the middle world. And we started more so with making these kind of dramatic sound journeys where we wanted to really bring people into a different space, which I guess could be said is more in the shamanic way. But yeah, where we would bring them, through a forest, and then they find something in the forest, or they find their spirit animal or something, and then they find a mountain, and then they start climbing the mountain, and then they have to go up the mountain, and it gets harder to get up the mountain. So really like a visualization, and you get to the top of the mountain, you see this cliff, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I have to dive deep into the water of the unknown or something, and then we would make this crescendo. And we have like amazing violin player Kai Moraes, who also played in Bakery. Like we would have him, and he'd be playing the violin, or one of our cello players like Ashia or Gabor, and they were just like, and then you jump off into the, you dive into your unconscious, and then whoosh. Yeah, and so many different types of sound journeys. And also we do like cacao ceremonies, so we then mix the plant medicine of cacao with the sound journey. But most of them tend to have the brainwave entrainment frequencies in them, but that just means that we need a sound system. And sometimes we prefer to just make it acoustic. And then when we make it acoustic, then the science kind of comes out of it. Yeah. Yeah. But we do a sound meditation training where we teach people about what is frequency, like what is the definition of a frequency? Why does that matter to me? What is resonance? What are harmonics? And what does it mean to be in harmony? And how is sound affecting us in our atomic structure? What is sound exactly? And how can we work with sound that it then actually affects us, not only energetically or emotionally or spiritually, but actually physically? Like, what is the pressure wave of a sound, and what is that doing? So yeah, we try to have like a holistic approach with Soneiro Collective. So we go quite deep into the yogic philosophy and quite deep into the shamanic world and the spirit world, but we also always try and bring it back to, and there is some rational evidence from rational studies that people can also look at. Yeah.
So what's your intention with these sound journeys for the people who participate?
In general, I always set an intention before I start a ceremony, and also before I play an instrument, because it's also something we teach in our sound training, is that it's very important. The intention that you put into the sound work is what comes out of it. So it's like I could play a Klangschale, a singing bowl, and just be thinking about how I don't like people, and you wouldn't have a nice experience, or you would not notice. But it's really, if I put the intention of, okay, I want to create this beautiful experience for everybody, that their intentions can be fulfilled and that they're held, that we hold the space and that they feel held and they feel safe, then that emotion is put through the sound into the people. And that's where the sound healing or sound therapy is created, is from that intention, what's behind it. And I believe that's also in life, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, saying how, at the moment I'm just trying to live my life like it's a massive ceremony. And like, so every moment, try to really fill it with intention and have it be a ritual somehow. And that's not to say that I'm going everywhere and going Hare Krishna and bowing and like, being lost in some kind of spiritual dream. It's more so just living life with intention and trying to like, okay, how do I feel in my body right now? Where am I right now? And like focus in on where I am and why am I doing this right now? Even like, why am I eating food right now? Okay, because I want to bring nutrition into my body. Okay, let me have a moment to think about that and just be thankful for that. And like, why do I come to the studio now? Why do I want to create this music? What intentions behind the music? But our intention as a collective and for the work we do is always to hold space sustainably, and that people are held, definitely, that it's like a safe space for people to explore their subconscious. So we try to create these like very aesthetically pleasing spaces so that when you come in, it's like when we do our sessions in Berlin or when we do our trainings or retreats, it's like you come in and the mats are there and the blanket is there and there's tea for you, and you can just come in and you can leave reality or your normal life behind and just be there for that experience and then just glide into a deep sound experience.
Beautiful. So what's it been like for you personally, shifting from this rock and roll lifestyle to this conscious sound work which you now create?
Oh, yeah, it was a big, I mean, I had a year of a transition phase, which was very difficult. Because there was a moment where I had both Bakery happening and Soneiro Collective, and they were both kind of building, and I felt I was in between this space of very conscious work and very, in a way, unconscious work. So in a way, of like there's a space with this full intention of like, what am I doing? Why are we doing it? And then it was this other space of kind of free flow and not so much thinking of why or how or what does this mean, but more so just doing. And there was this pull of like, who am I? You know, like, am I this crazy rock and roll guy or am I this yoga teacher? And yeah, and it felt like a pulling in both directions. And then at some point, I realized that I was creating a duality within myself of I have to be like this or I have to be like that. And I said, well, why don't I just combine them in the most beautiful way and then keep making music, but not make music that has I was making music that had a lot of darkness connected to it, which was also beautiful. And I was very into Radiohead and, you know, and going into that space. And that's beautiful. And you can find such creative, complex, emotive structures of art through that. But I realized I wanted to create something that came more from the heart. And that would also, I realized that as an artist, I personally believe that you have a responsibility to, if you have like a little bit of influence by the people who listen to your music and like it. And I feel that as an artist, I have the responsibility to bring positivity and good and love into the world. Because when I think about how I was raised, I mean, my mother is a gospel singer and a church singer. And she also does lots of art. And she raised me on the Beatles, basically. Like, she would sing the songs to me. I learned all the songs as a kid. I can just, you know, recite them, you know. And I remember that music is, every song is just about love in the end. You know, as basically all pop music is, but especially the Beatles. And like Queen as well. We listen to a lot of Queen. Fleetwood Mac and stuff. But how it was really based on love and how that affected me so much and affected my heart so much. And I went, is my music reflecting the love that I want to bring into the world? And I was like, I think my music's reflecting a lot of the mind that I bring into the world, which is also amazing. You know, like, I listen to the tracks we created and they're beautiful, they're very psychedelic and they go all over the place, you know. But and they're very honest and they're just like vulnerable, and that's true, and that's, you know, that's beautiful art. But then I realized, okay, I want to create this intention life, and I want to, with the small influence I have as an artist, I want to bring happiness and positivity. And of course, there's also negative emotions that come into that. And I mean, most of my music's based on the blues, so it's also like, you know, ripping your heart out and rawr. And yeah. And so now I try to combine them together. I still do like jam sessions with friends of mine where we just get together in a basement, you know, with all this gear, and we'll just jam out and just rock and roll. And I will say sometimes I miss it, the pure just rock and roll. But I have plans of like putting a band together again to bring that feeling back into life. Yeah. But I still play it, like, I still make downbeat electronic music, and I still play parties and I DJ at parties. And that's great, you know, and that's just, you know, and I know that sometimes I'm playing at those parties and a lot of those people are just there to consume. But that's fine, you know, because I don't play music that, say, like certain industrial techno music or certain techno music is kind of created for people just to take drugs. I feel like it's really intense and raw and then people are just like, yeah, I take more. But even when I DJ house sets or like house music, it's always like this positivity, you know, with solely vocals behind it, and it's like bringing people into this like, this hedonism of just enjoying life and just dancing to enjoy it. And then doing ecstatic dances is also a beautiful kind of mixture of that, making somewhat of a sound journey through dance. And then people can really freak out as well. Like my ecstatic dances at some point get to 140 BPM and it's basically like techno. I get Berghain and people, and you got all the hippie people like getting down to Berghain music basically and then bringing it back into another space. So I think you can find a really beautiful balance of both worlds. And I also feel it's important because there's some times where I'm just so much into yoga and meditation that I feel like I'm lost in this kind of dream space and I'm not really in reality. And I like to bring myself back, sometimes maybe like go to a club or, that's the great thing about the festivals here in Germany where you can go to a workshop and then go party, and really bring those two worlds together.
What does it feel like when you're in reality then?
What's reality? I say that often, and I always think, what's reality? What do you mean by reality?
What do you mean by reality?
Yeah,
so you talk about when you get a bit lost in this dream state and the meditation and the yoga and you want to kind of come back to reality a bit more. Yeah. What does that feel like?
That's like coming back to like a rational space, because I can find if I just stay in a meditative yogic space, then I go, oh, well, everything's fine and nothing exists and I don't exist and I'm just here, and you can just stay there. But then there's also things I want to do, and like get stuff done and, work, create retreats, create music. So kind of getting back in that boat of work, I guess I would say, is the reality that I mean in that situation.
And how did you go about bringing these two worlds together then?
I mean, through that year, I basically had to figure out what it is I wanted to do and who I wanted to be as an artist and who I wanted to be as a person. And I think it was something that I didn't think much about in my early 20s. I was more so just flowing through life. And I would let kind of the current guide me. I was really this go with the flow guy, and I read a lot of Osho books in California. And, I was like hitchhiking all over the States, and I was really just like, oh yeah, I go here and I go there. Oh, and I just live life, and I just live. I had this big thing of like living within insecurity, which I read from an Osho book, and I really attached to that. I was like, yeah, security that's the problem, and should just live this, open life. And then I did that to a point where I was just too open, and there was no structure. And so I think it's like holding on to that flow creative space that I had and that I still have now as just this pure musician, pure artist, but combining that with the discipline that I've learned. So there's also amazing men's facilitators and men's work, men that I've found like on Instagram, for example, and that I've met in real life, who are very like grounded individuals who also show this divine masculine energy. And I think it's also connecting to the divine masculine, which is something I've been working on a lot recently, and understanding what masculinity is. And so that's like understanding what is the discipline, like how do I bring the right nutrition in my body, like how do I exercise in a way that I'm then feeling fulfilled, and how do I fulfill myself in my life? And that's a mixture of discipline and free flow. So I would say having the creative space, but then also scheduling it in, like trying to schedule your life. And coming from a space where, I never went to university. I did like a few months, but, in the United States, it's like I thought, should I pay 50,000 euros for this? Maybe not. So then I always say I went to the University of Real Life, because I went to California and then hitchhiked through the States and worked on farms and basically met mentors all over the place. Like I stayed on a Buddhist farm in Northern California and it was just me and this one guy who was meditating all the time. One of the most intense experiences of my entire life, because I was just alone in the middle of the woods, and I was 18 years old, and I was just like, wow. And I would just work. And then there was one, I remember he had 3 days where he told me, you're just going to rake this space with pebbles. You know how they kind of do in the ashram? And he's like, you're just going to do this. I was like, okay. And then really get into it. And so I would meet these different mentors throughout my life, who then show me kind of, who guide me in that way. So like to kind of bring that all together, like I meet these women who show me the way, and men actually who also show me the way. So for me, it's also been, as I'm 27, like finding different mentors or different people who can inspire me just from their presence and their being, and then learning what I can from them. And so that kind of school of life is from the teachers that I meet in actual people. And so it's really bringing that kind of free flow creative space and the discipline that I've learned from reading books or meeting people or podcasts as well, bringing that together and trying to find my way through that.
How do the divine feminine and the divine masculine sit together for you and you have these kind of two sets of amazing influences or mentors or inspiring beings in your life?
Yeah, difficult question. I'm always still trying to figure out what that, of course, means. Like what exactly, feminine energy and masculine energy, or what divine feminine or divine masculine energy is. But I think it's this pure, honest space. Like the divine feminine for me is this really, this open and creative and vulnerable energy, where it is this free flowing energy, basically. And the energy of creation and the energy of emotion. And this divine masculine is more kind of fortitude and strength and groundedness. And that's just in my personal, the way that I see things. I don't think that is the way things are or what masculine and femininity is. But when you ask me what it means to me, and I try to bring those worlds together, I mean, also a divine masculine is being vulnerable. So in the same way.
Can you tell us more about the men's circles?
Yeah, sure. We do a men's circle every month. The next one is coming up soon. And basically it's just a talking circle. So with Soneiro Collective, we actually wanted to connect more with men because we realized in the yoga, meditation, spiritual scene, it's a majority of females, which is beautiful. But for example, our audience is about 80% women. And that's great. But we realized the people who also really need to do the work right now are men. And so really trying to reach out more and more to men. And also on my personal journey of understanding what masculinity is, it was also very important for me to create that space of like, okay, let's get together and let's talk. And let's just find an open space where we can talk about things in a safe, held space. And yeah, so I got together with a good friend of mine, Michael Me Too Turner, and he's also been doing men's work for a while, and he's just like such a good brother and such a good friend. And then we got with his friend Arda Batu, he works with runes and high magic, and then also my friend Gerdos, who's a beautiful musician and beautiful person. And so we got together and said, okay, let's make a men's circle, just a community thing. We just do it for free, and we would meet in Chaptoa Park. Now that it will be winter soon, we're going to find an indoor location. And yeah, basically a men's talking circle is just sitting together. There's a few rules, like speaking out of a place of non-judgment. If you have the talking stick, you speak. If you don't have the talking stick, you shouldn't speak unless you want to engage on a certain topic, and it's okay for the other person who is sharing. And that you speak from the heart. And what's beautiful and what surprised me from the beginning is that I really didn't have to do anything. Like I just said this and we just sit down for this space, and somehow just sitting down there and just men together and knowing, hey, everything we say here stays here, and nobody's judging each other. People just open up beautifully. Like sometimes people cry, sometimes there's sadness, sometimes people are super happy. And then it's also a space where we can talk about like father issues or mother issues, or what is vulnerability and what is weakness or what is strength, and and to just have that space to talk about those things without judgment, I feel is very important, especially at this time, and especially with the whole COVID-19 situation where everyone was kind of locked in their own heads for quite some time. But yeah, and then there's also a group called Brother Seeker, which is from Nick Warner. And now me and Me Too are working with them, and we're trying to create more men's gatherings, so men's workshops with breath work, with yoga, with ice bathing, Wim Hof method, and then also create gatherings with a sweat lodge soon, and also like full, maybe make a retreat at some point, like a men's retreat, and of course the idea of further in the future with them make even bigger gatherings when we're allowed to do that.
What does success look like to you now, and how has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I was younger and more in this musician phase, success for me was just playing in front of lots of people and just making as many albums as possible. And now that I've moved into this more conscious lifestyle, I'd say success for me is just really having this contentment, or really this thankfulness in my life, and just always understanding, like really understanding what I'm thankful for, and really giving it that space of like, oh, I'm thankful for this, and oh, this is beautiful. And of course, at some point, to have a house a bit more in nature, and to build up these projects in a way that the projects kind of run themselves. Because at the moment it is a lot of work, because our life kind of runs around events right now. So creating events in person or sometimes online, where people come together and it's okay, so now we make this event and we're there and we do it, and it's a lot of work. So I'd say success is more so that the project is moving on its own, and that it doesn't need so much pushing or drive from us, so that we can have it driving itself at some point. And that's just putting together the spaces that works. But yeah, I always imagine at some point to have like a little house a bit outside of Berlin, because I really feel grounded here, even though I've only been here for 7 years. Really feel grounded in Berlin, and speak German and love it, and have beautiful connections here. So I could imagine to have like a nice house, and maybe like a boat would be nice.
And why in nature or a bit out into the countryside?
Yeah, that's something we realize every time we do a retreat, because our retreats with Soneiro Collective are always in these beautiful nature locations, like completely, like there's no sounds of cars normally, unless we do it. Sometimes we do it in Mallorca, and then there's some sounds of cars. But normally it's really just, in the middle of nowhere, in a forest, where you can go to a lake, and you're just, you can just be in that forest, and we're there for a week. And then we're like, wow, because of course the retreats are a lot of work, but it's so beautiful to see people's process and how they transform, and how people go through this, and how everyone's so thankful in the end, and they love it, and we love it, and there's just so much love that's created from that. And then just being in a place where you wake up and you just hear mockingbirds in the morning, it's just so beautiful. And I've lived in the city for 7 years, and always in the city. It was never like kind of outside. It was always like, where I live now in Neukölln is quite chill. It's like I live on a very small street, but still, for example, like this morning at 8 a.m, someone started using a jackhammer on the sidewalk outside of my house, and just like jeez, and just feels like someone's drilling into your brain, And going back to the brainwave entrainment frequencies, when there's something that loud and that fast, it's amazing how your brain immediately goes into the stress response, which is the beta wave frequencies. And I felt that immediately. I was just like, poof, and you're just like, too much. And having a space in nature, I also have friends who have spaces in nature, and every time you go there, it's just, it's this openness, and then you're connecting with the elements. And the beautiful thing about Berlin is you have amazing parks. I have a park right outside my house. I have the canal outside my house. But really being in nature where you can get out of this kind of crazy Berlin energy sometimes is very good.
Yeah, that resonates with me a lot after growing up in London, and then living a bit in New York for work, and then spending 3 years living in Berlin, which I loved. But I just felt like I had to connect more with nature as well. That's why I'm now living in the van and living connected to nature as much as possible, dipping into the cities to see people, for connections, for input, for inspiration. But then every day being able to wake up and be surrounded by green, I find just so much more connection with myself and with my path.
Yeah, it's so nice. Your van life is amazing.
Yeah, you've been around for tea. So.
Yeah, it's a beautiful van. It's nice.
Thank you. So as we come to the end of our chat today, is there anything that comes to mind you want to share, like a closing thought, or maybe a mantra you live by, anything at all?
Yeah, at the moment, for me, what's really present is just gratitude. It's really, and I know everybody knows this, but just really taking a moment every day to have a space where you think about what you're thankful for. Because I think also psychologically, it's one of the best practices you can do just for your own mental health. But then to also take that moment and go like, wow, I have these amazing people in my life. I have this amazing work in my life. And even if things aren't good for you, it's amazing when you take that moment of gratitude that you realize how many amazing things there are, even when people are sick and people are dying, and it can be a tough moment in your life, there's still 1,000 things that you can be grateful for. And I always remember that, because when I wake up in the morning, I always drink water and then do yoga and then have this gratitude practice. I know the days when I don't have that, and it's weird. I'm always like, I'm missing something. So my last little thing would be that everybody, even if you just have the moment right now, to just think about what you're grateful for, and maybe write it in your journal. You can also then make that a practice of every day writing it in your journal.
Beautiful. So how do you practically fit that practice in? Is it something that you write down or that you think through? Or
I used to do this thing called 2-minute mornings.
Yeah.
Where you would write down one thing you want to let go, one thing you're grateful for, and I think one thing you want to focus on. I think so. I did that for about 2 months. And then I just started integrating it into my morning yoga practice. And that morning yoga practice can be 5 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, just depending on how much time I have. But I feel it's really important for me to wake up, and the first thing that I do is leave the phone on airplane mode and drink water, and then just get into my body. So like get out of my head. Because I think, like most people, I wake up in the morning and it's just like thoughts, tons of thoughts, and I just go, okay, I drink water and I get out of this. And so getting into the body and getting into ujjayi breath and just being in the moment. And then when I sit down to do like a tiny meditation at the end of that, I just say what I'm thankful for and just go through all the things that come up to me. And so that's how I integrate it. And then it's like having that moment of also intention for the day of like, I started the day with gratitude. And so it's a great way to begin, definitely. Yeah.
Is there anything you do at night as well to help balance that?
I read at night, but that's about it. I get quite tired. So I like to read. I love Tom Robbins, for example. Have you read Tom Robbins? I
haven't.
It's incredible writing. It's very...
Is there a book you can recommend to us?
Yeah, the Jitterbug Perfume was his big hit book. That's amazing. And if you're talking about like surrealist writing, and also from a space of incredible vocabulary and an incredible way of creating metaphors. But I recommend all his books. I've read almost all his books now, and they're incredibly entertaining. They're very Dadaist in a way, so they're just kind of like, connecting things together that shouldn't be connected. Like sometimes it's like there was one book where he was connecting something about alien reptilians, and a tarot card reader, and a woman who works in the stock market in a stock market crash, and a monkey that this guy adopted who is a crazy monkey that's a jewel thief. So it all sounds very crazy when I explain to people. People say, that sounds weird. And it's like, it does sound weird. But when you read it, it comes from this... I mean, he's basically a literary genius in the way he can create a metaphor that you're just so soaked into the surrealist space that you're just like, what? Like in that same book, I think it's called Half Asleep in Frog's Pajamas. Also, like the titles are like, what? He has like a chapter where it talks about the dust mites that live in her bed. And it's just about like the perspective of the dust mites. And then that kind of connects to everything, how they're just waiting for her to come back. And when she comes back, for her to squish them so that they're not alone anymore. And it's really funny, and it's really beautiful. It's kind of like a holistic perspective of thinking about how do I write this insane, funny, serious book that then connects all these things together. So I definitely recommend Tom Robbins. And at the moment, I'm reading Psychomagic by Alejandro Jurovsky. And if you're interested in tarot and self-healing and you're open to those kind of things, he has a specific method called Psychomagic, which is about creating rituals to break through kind of issues you have in your life from a psychotherapeutic standpoint, which is very, very interesting. Yeah.
Are you putting anything into practice or experimenting with anything from that book yet?
Not from Psychomagic. I was reading a book about high magic, which is about these occult rituals, and I was actually working with that for some time. But with psychomagic, not yet. There's then a whole lexicon he created of the different ritual acts. And for example, it's kind of in the way that you would think of like you write a letter to your ex-lover and you burn it. Like, for example, like that's a ritual you would make in a way of a psychomagic act, but it gets even more in depth, and there's certain things that you can, sometimes it gets very crazy and you have to do crazy things.
And then lastly, where can we find you online?
Yeah, you can find me at templehaze.com. And you can also find Soneiro Collective at soneirocollective.com. We have still a lot of events happening, so you can always check our calendar, or on Instagram, Soneiro Collective, that's Soneiro Collective, or Temple Haze on Instagram. Yeah, we have a sound meditation training, which is where we teach people how to work with gongs and singing bowls, facilitation, how to sing mantras, what is nada yoga, what is mantra yoga, how do you create the experiences that we're really well known for creating. And that's in October, November of this year. There's still some spaces free, so you can find all that information on our website. And yeah, I have music that's coming out. I have a downbeat electronic EP, which is, it's called Luminous, and it's also coming out on vinyl, which is very exciting. And that should be coming out in September. And then I have a full LP that I'm working on right now, which will be coming out next year. So there's still things in the works, definitely.
Amazing.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed our chat and learned something new. I certainly did. Hearing about how Temple has worked on balancing what he sees as his unconscious work of the past with his current conscious work was very interesting to me. I have had the same challenge coming from fashion consulting and moving into transformational coaching. I believe that when we practice the art of saying no to projects that don't quite feel right or align with the impact we want to make, the right path and balance for us becomes clearer. I also loved how Temple talked about the importance of setting an intention when creating a sound journey or playing an instrument. As he explained, the intention you set is what comes out. I think this can be applied across life with anything we do. I have a daily practice of setting my intention for the day as part of my morning journaling, which really helps to keep me aligned with my overarching mission, rather than getting lost in the sea of daily tasks that might arise. But I also like the idea of thinking about the intention for every creative endeavor, every exchange with another, or every task we choose to take on. Temple's daily practice of gratitude also sounds great. Writing 3 things I'm grateful for in my journal morning and evening is something I've benefited from too. This trains your positive mindset and in turn multiplies your positive experiences. This is part of taking the reins on manifesting the life you want. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now and leave a 5-star review. It means so much more to me than you realize. Aside from podcasting, I coach and consult conscious entrepreneurs and changemakers to help them build their personal power, align with their purpose, and guide them to excel in times of transition in business and relationships. I work with one-on-one clients and run a group program too. To find out more and stay up to date on my coaching, podcasting, and inspiration, you can find me on Instagram at Nikki Trott, that's NIKKITROTT, or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you, and you can DM me on Instagram or email me through my website if you have any questions or comments or want to find out about working with me. See you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. And until then, live your freedom.